So I've been getting old for quite a while now. Um, I remember playing in a big soccer final in 1994. Some of you guys probably don't even remember 1994. Um, and I read the newspaper about the report of my soccer game, and um, I had quite a good game, so I thought they might actually mention me specifically. And I noticed that they referred to me as Alan Miller, the veteran midfielder. My God, that was 30 years ago, and I was a veteran then. So, as a runner, I gave up on all my PRs sort of many years ago. I did my usual running training, squeezed in around my job, and sort of as I aged, I sort of downgraded my performance expectations. Then two things happened that sort of changed all of that. Firstly, I retired and I had more bandwidth to give to running, including less stress for recovery. So I was recovering better. And number two, Liz and I started this podcast. That actually greatly increased my understanding and motivation around running. So I was getting more education from the books we were covering and a lot more motivation from some of the other books we were covering. With both of these things, I started a new era of running based on process improvement and resulting in some nice results. Despite being way past the 50 referred to in the title of today's book. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to try something new or different. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author Caolan MacMahon about her book, Running Past 50.
As you move past the age of 50, the physiological demands of running require adjustments in training, intensity, recovery, goal setting, and mental outlook. Running Past 50 is a guide to addressing those demands so you can continue to enjoy and compete and excel in the sport that you love. There are also training plans in this book. So those looking for training plans, there are training plans for 5K, 10K, half marathon, and ultramarathon. And each training plan has like several different levels in it. So from beginner to advanced runner with an intermediate plan in there as well. A little bit about Caolan. So Caolan MacMahon has been dedicated to running since she was 8 years old, and she continues to pursue her passion several decades later. She has completed more than 80 marathons and ultramarathons since turning 50, which 80 in a lifetime is impressive, but she's done it in a very short period of time. She's done 6 Boston marathons and 3 New York City marathons. Caolan is the 2013 RRCA Grand Master 50K champion and has achieved dozens of overall podium and age group finishes. She's the head coach and director of the Long Run Coaching LLC. She has lots of certifications related to running, including USATF L1 coaching instructor. But she's also got like some endurance sports nutrition certifications, and she's got a whole list in there. Beyond her accomplishments in running and coaching, she's also an educator, a rock climber, so that's kind of new. Probably makes her really strong for running, and former professor of philosophy, ethicist, animal activist, and writer. She has been a contributing writer for Runner's World and provides race reports and contributions to Self, New York Times, Ultra Running Magazine, Colorado Runner, 5280, and Elevation Outdoors. She has also been blogging because, she doesn't have enough of this writing thing. She has been blogging for The Chronic Runner since 2011. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome you to the podcast, Caolan.
Thank you. And to be honest, I haven't been blogging for a while, but I was very consistently blogging for quite a long time.
But you wrote a book.
But I wrote a book, and so... I have been saying that I want to get back to blogging now that the book is done, but putting a book together while working full time, while training, and while being a parent is not easy. So
I
something
can
had to
imagine.
give. Something
Yeah,
had to give,
yeah.
and blogging was what gave. So I would like to get back to that. I just haven't gotten there yet. So
That's okay. You traded writing for writing, basically. So, instead of writing on the blog, you were putting it all together.
yeah, what's interesting, and I always wanted to write a book, but it's very different writing a book like this than blogging. And so blogging, you have some artistic
Freedom.
freedom. You've got some longitude and latitude in terms of expressing your opinions without necessarily backing them up. So you can say things on a blog and you don't have to go and look for the research to back up what you're saying. And with a book, that is a necessary part, at least given the fact that I come from an academic background. So if I'm going to say something, it may be common knowledge to me, but it may not be to people outside of the field. And so that is something that I have to show through research that's out there to support what I'm saying. So there's a little bit of more freedom in blogging. But as a coach, I also have to back up what I say instead of just spewing out my personal opinions on things. When I'm talking about training, it's not just my personal experience. It's based on my education and the research out there and my personal experience as well.
So what prompted you to write this particular book, and why did you want to write for runners over 50?
Well, Human Kinetics approached me. So I got an email asking if I wanted to write the book. And it's interesting that I've kind of segued into focusing on the 40 plus runner group in my coaching.
Yeah.
Hasn't really been an aim of mine, but it is an area where I specialize. Specifically the over 40 runner who wants to BQ, or the over 50 runner who wants BQ, or wants to run their first marathon, or wants to get that sub 3 hour, or that sub 3:30, or that sub 4 hour. That has become my kind of niche. And as my coaching has evolved and developed, that just seems to be the people that I work with consistently. So I had a lot of experience with runners over 50. And I work with a lot of runners over 50 into their 60s and 70s. So the book, I've had a lot of comments. Well, are you going to write a book for runners over 60 or runners over 70? Over 50 covers all of that.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about over 50, and there are changes along the way as we get older, but the principles remain the same. They're just certain things that you have to pay a little bit more attention to when you're 60 or 70. But the actual number is less important than the individual experience. So it's not like, oh, you wake up the morning of your 60th birthday and bang, something's changed. Even though there's like research out there that says, oh, there's this point when you're 60 that something happens. And you slow down and you don't recover as well. And your VO2 max drops and your cardiac output drop, all of these things, but that's still highly individual. And that research is based on averages. And it may not also be research that's focusing on athletes. So I have many examples of people who just don't fit into that. Obviously, Alan is one of them. But you can say, oh, well, those are outliers. But the outliers show us that the so-called rules of aging don't necessarily apply just because there's a certain number. So it's really about how you feel and how you're responding to the training. And it's very individual. And it doesn't matter whether you're over 50 or under 50. That's the case. We all respond to training differently. So, dealing with women, all women respond to menopause and perimenopause differently. Men go through hormonal changes as well. It's harder to track because they don't have cycles the way that women do, but there's still hormonal changes. And whatever age you're at, you have to kind of pay attention and learn how your body is responding to things, instead of just expecting things to be, well, I'm at this point in my life, so this is what I need to do. So you asked the question, basically, I actually have never asked my editors, and this is a question I want to ask them, is why did you come to me? How did you find me? But they proposed this. I put a submission together and it was accepted, and that's how it started. And it was a project that I was very interested in going into it, because one of the interesting phenomenons in running right now is that people are not quitting because they're getting older. And this generation, kind of the 50s and 60, the 50 and 60-year-olds today, are continuing to run when they would have quit by now. And so the fastest growing demographic is runners who are continuing to run as they get older. So it seemed like it was a timely opportunity, and it was one that I thought would be cool to investigate more.
So if this book had been written, let's say, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, do you think that Human Kinetics would have wanted you to include 40 and over in that, in that population that needs like to pay attention to certain things like recovery? And I feel like
Well, 50 is the
in
new
the
40.
last
Is that what
few,
you're saying?
no, I'm just saying that like in the last few years and even at the like pro level, I feel like there are a lot more runners that in the past wouldn't have been there. And they're still like competitive. It's not like they're just there hanging on the back. They're like, Sarah Hall, who
Yeah, Olympic
can run
qualifiers.
225. You know what I mean? Like they're not
Yeah,
um
40 plus year olds are still competitive at the elite level, which is probably, yeah, you wouldn't have seen that 20 years ago. I remember back in the day when Bill Rogers and Frank Shorter turned 40, and it was like this big thing because these icons were in the master's class, as in, okay, well, they're getting ushered off
Yeah,
with honor
move along.
after a
Yeah.
good career. And now you're seeing runners, and this is happening a lot in ultramarathons, that older runners are remaining competitive through their 40s and their 50s. So it's, winning races that are very competitive. 20 years ago, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of 40 plus. You started seeing 20 years ago, 40 plus, how to train when you're over 40, kind of.
But I remember there was one Olympics, or maybe it was a world championship, and I think like it was either the winner or the second place woman was 42, and it was a big deal because like they were talking about it on, regular news, whereas usually like regular news never talks about running. So it was a big deal. And now I feel like that wouldn't be such a big deal because you have it like at every big world championship, I feel like.
Right. And, it's not, they're still competing at an elite level at that age is still,
Not normal.
you still have the outliers, but, if you're familiar with Courtney Dauwalter.
Sure.
So she's the one of the top female all around ultra runners. She's getting close to 40 and she's not slowing down. So
we saw that last year.
Right. She is still crushing it. And yeah, I don't see that changing. And in fact, I think it's going to become more common. But we see this all the time in sports, and that is people push limits and suddenly people realize that they aren't limits. That person did that. You see this in rock climbing a lot. You know, when I started rock climbing, 513 was like the hardest rock climb. Now it's like, I don't know, 516 or something. It always took someone going that extra level. And then all the other people started doing it because it showed that it could be done. And so everyone who continues to run hard, you know, chasing goals, whatever those goals are, running and pursuing those goals into their 40s, 50s, 60s. And I kind of laugh when I say 40s because I'm like, 40s. 40s are easy.
40s. That's not even old yet.
Every time I hear a 40-something-year-old say, I'm so old, and I'm just like, baby, you know, take advantage of it now. But truly, you know, we're all different. And, you know, I communicate with a lot of people who run the gamut in terms of what they're capable of doing right now, but giving them an example that they can try to do a little more, that it's okay to do a little more. Because what I do see in especially the 50+ age group, and I see this less in the 40+ age group, is concern that it is unhealthy for them. Like, should I be pushing myself this hard? Is this dangerous? And unfortunately, still today, some doctors are encouraging that attitude. So yeah. Of course it's individual. Yes, if you have a medical condition that means that you shouldn't be pushing it, that's different, but that's not age related per se. That is your personal health challenge. So it's not age, whether you're, you know, if you're 70 and you feel good and you can keep pushing your limits, there's no reason not to.
A bit of a general question, sort of just riffing off what you were saying there, is, you know, science and data, the information that the studies coming out years and years ago tended to be based on a few, not a huge population, a few elite male athletes. And I think, is it a fair comment that now we've got, you know, much more relevant data that covers populations, more relevant to females and more relevant to general population people, and now there's more science that supports us going on into our old age?
Absolutely. And that comes with you have more subjects to study. We simply didn't have people to look at doing these things. And Gene Dykes, who wrote the foreword to my book, he's 76 now. He's right now gearing up to run the Monster 300 in Arizona. And he
that sounds long.
He has set world records at pretty much every distance for his age, but he continues. Does he acknowledge that it's getting harder? Yes. But that doesn't mean that he can't keep trying. And for that, that is important to the quality of his life. So, you know, he's an example and he started late in life running. He was not a lifelong runner, which could be helpful when you're in your 70s or not. So right now and this applies to all female runners as well. Female runners were not studied because they're too complicated. Their biology is too complicated. It muddles the science.
Too many hormones.
So let's just deal with men because they're easier. But that is changing as well. And, you know, a lot of the information we have on female runners is extrapolated from studies with male runners, given our understanding now of hormones. But now we're actually doing the research on women. And now we're actually doing the research on older runners because they're there to do the research on. You know, I still see lots of calls for participants in research where the cutoff is 40 or whatever they're researching. But this is changing. And but it wouldn't change in the past because you didn't have the subjects, and now you do. So that's And the same with, say, ultra running. Actually, Western states, it has been very involved in research and invites the participants of the race to take part in research during the race. So there's lots of research like on bone density, and things of that sort. So, I ran Western states last year, and we're invited to take part in these research, and they would literally pull you out of the race in the middle of the race to do work on you. So it was
That's so funny.
But
It's
that's
like,
how.
wait,
But
but
that,
I'm running.
but that's how research is done, and that's how real useful information is gathered. So it's happening. It takes, research takes a while. So,
Yeah.
and it takes a while to catch up with trends. And so still today, I mean, we have so much more to learn about this. And it's definitely a new frontier, both for women's athletics and for, I don't want to say senior athletics, but those especially over 50.
It seems to me there are sort of two populations of older runners. There's those who are sort of, oh, I've suddenly realized that I'm old. I better do a bit more exercise. And, my doctor's told me I'm going to have a heart attack if I keep doing, my executive lifestyle or whatever. So I better get on and start doing more exercise. Let's try this running thing. Oh, that's quite difficult. How am I going to handle that? So there's kind of that population of runners who are sort of coming in. And then there are those people who've been running all their life, and now they're going, okay, I'm in an older population now. How do I optimize? How do I try to take my running forward or stop myself from degrading as I get older? Is the book aimed at both of those populations or only the latter one?
Both. So the aim for the book was to address both continuing to chase ambitious goals as a runner gets older. So a runner who's been running, but is dealing with a slow sliding of paces, dealing with some issues that are changing, and also the runner who is coming to running as a new runner. And I see this especially the case with older women. So I'm 61. I started running when I was 8, but my first race, I was the only girl in the race. That was pre-Title IX. So when Title IX happened, then you start seeing women's athletics increasing, but still there is not a lot of participation, and young girls were not encouraged to do sports. And I tell the story, when I was 8th grade, Title IX had passed.
For our non-US listeners,
so
we should
Title IX was giving girls equal opportunity in sports. And so any team, schools had to have an equal number of teams for girls and boys. They didn't have to necessarily be the same sports, but they had to have equal numbers of opportunities. So if there were 10 sports played for boys, there had to be 10 sports played for girls. Well, I was in 8th grade and I wanted to be on the cross country team. And I had a friend who also, well, several of us wanted to, and they started a girls cross country team, and they didn't schedule any meets. And so my friend and I threatened to go out for the football team unless they would let us run with the boys, because we wanted to do meets. And so they let us run with the boys, but we were the only two that raced. And I remember practicing with the boys, and we'd run by the girls just sitting, hanging out, talking. They weren't actually running. And so what I see today is, women in their 60s, especially, they weren't encouraged to do sports. And in fact, they were discouraged from doing sports. They get to their 40s, they've raised their family. They realize that they need to do some exercise, and they discover running. And I can't tell you how many runners I've coached, female runners I've coached in their 40s, who ended up, going for those Boston qualifying races. So, but it was all new to them. And what I find with older runners who are coming to running new, they have no idea how to start. Because yes, there are books out there that explain training and all of that. And, you know, you can get kind of lost in the weeds on that. And so, you know, what do they do? Is it okay? I see these questions, I hear these questions over and over. Is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay? How do I do this? How do I progress? They don't really know how to start. So the book is really aimed at those people who want to start and don't know what to do, and the people who want to continue to keep reaching goals, because those people have been driven. And sometimes, especially with a runner who's been running for a long time and maybe they're chasing their old PRs, oftentimes what I find is they get discouraged because their old training methods didn't work and they try to force them. I've had runners come to me and they say, I keep working harder and harder and getting slower and slower. I've heard that over and over and over again. It's like, that's because you're working too hard. You don't work smart, not hard. And make the hard, but you can't do that all the time, or you're going to end up it's just going to end up, you're going to end up falling off and continuing to feel frustrated and like you're working so hard and getting nowhere. So having that history behind you, well, I used to run an 8-minute pace as a recovery run, and now my recovery run is 11-minute pace. Okay. You start where you are. If that's the case and you want to get somewhere else, you have to start where you are right now and work towards what you want. But you can't start where you want to be and hope that somehow your body catches up, because that's not how it works.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do, because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical, which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's Caffeine Bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. And it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor. They're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the...
Speaking of which, back to the podcast. Also, it's a little funny because like recovery pace doesn't matter really. I mean, like it's the race time that you want. It's not really, and the recovery pace is a little irrelevant because it could be, when I'm marathon training, I could tell you my recovery pace is like pretty slow.
It should be. It should be like, as I describe it as smell the roses pace. Like I used to take my very elderly dog with me because she would literally slow me down and I'd have to stop and, you know.
Yeah. I think that like when in books sometimes there's I don't know, like your recovery pace should be like a minute and a half or something slower than your 5K pace or something. I find that's pretty quick. So my recovery pace is quite a bit slower than that.
That would be very fast. That would be very fast because usually like marathon pace is, you know, anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds faster than your aerobic pace. So recovery pace, really a recovery pace should just be a jog. And as I try to get people to just like, don't wear your watch, just go out for a jog. Super easy jog. And the goal of a recovery run is that you feel better after it than when you started.
Yeah, so. The no watch, that must be a hard sell though. Do you manage to convince anyone?
Some, yes. And some have and some have been precipitated into an existential crisis. but it can be freeing. It can be freeing to
I
run
think
without a watch.
this is one of the problems, I think, with maybe people who are not very experienced runners, and maybe even people who are experienced runners. When you go out, every run's almost it has a purpose, maybe, and one of the purposes could be recovery, but every run is also psychological profiling, how am I doing evaluation. So even when you run a recovery run, you look at it and go, oh, does that mean I'm going okay? Or does that mean I'm getting worse? And like, it's not the purpose of that run. And you have to learn to kind of forget those things on those runs. And it's quite hard to deprogram people. Oh, they're constantly looking at their watch and looking at their Strava and looking at their trend and going, oh, I'm getting less fit, or like, this is not the purpose of the run.
Yeah, I know like sometimes I'll go for an easy run with my husband and I'll be like, "Oh, this feels too hard. I think I need to slow down." And then he'll look at his watch and he'll be like, "Yeah, but we're going 5:30." Like that's minutes per kilometer because I know in the
Yep,
US,
that's
I don't know
fine.
what that
I
is in
get, I
mile
do
pace.
I do the kilometer thing as well.
And it's such a funny thing because I just don't know what to respond to that. I'm like, "Yeah, and like I'm just I just feel like I can't do this for another 30 minutes. I just want to slow down. So yeah, it's so funny.
Well, the same thing goes for any single run. I mean, obviously there are some runs that test our fitness and are meant to give us a little test. And maybe you don't feel good that day. It happens. We're not machines, and we have good days and bad days for all kinds of reasons that we may not be able to pinpoint. And what I always tell people is, if you have a bad day or even 2 bad days, that's not something to say, oh, no, I thought I was getting stronger. I thought I was fit, and I'm not. And this is a phenomenon. And I literally just sent out an email today about this, that someone can feel strong and getting stronger for several weeks. And then one bad run makes them think, oh my gosh, it's all amounted to nothing. I'm not getting stronger. I'm not getting fitter. And so this one bad run negates all of those good runs. And that's not how it works. You're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to have days that you could feel like you could run forever. And you're going to have days that from the first step, it's going to be hard. And nothing matters about one day. It's trends. So if you're feeling like you're struggling for several days, then you need to say, okay, I need some recovery time for whatever reason. And another thing that people don't take into account is life stress. The body does not distinguish between types of stress. Running stress, life stress, work stress, all adds up. And so if you're dealing with life stress, and a lot of times we run to deal with life stress, but that is going to add to our overall stress. So if you are, trying to train for a goal and your training is demanding, that extra stress that comes with other things outside of running can be a breaking point. So, but yeah, putting too much weight on any one run is a bad idea. And I wrote something once that there's no such thing as a fluke. And you hear this all the time in racing, like you run a great race. You're like, oh, that was a fluke. That was a fluke. I just had a good day. And I explain to people that there's no such thing as a fluke, a so-called fluke, a good result, a good experience, feeling strong, shows you what you're capable of. If you don't happen to reach that, that's a different issue. But it's not that somehow you performed beyond your capabilities. It's showing you your capabilities. And so there is no such thing as, well, I just happened to have a good day. That good day showed you what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And the bad days are just bad days. They're not
Yeah.
showing you anything except that, you're human and you have bad days.
And sometimes you can have like bad months and bad
You can have bad
seasons.
months, you can even have tough years. And that's part of training, is that it's not, if you're consistent in your training, then you have to look at the overall picture, and you're going to have ups and downs and ebbs and flows.
So, one of these sort of periods where you could actually have a bad few months or years is for women is the perimenopause, menopause kind of years. Um, and actually, well, we have a friend, and she apparently kind of went through a dip in performance and then now is like doing super, super well. Um, so it's like she kind of broke free from that or came out the other end or whatever it is. But do you have any, I don't know, any tips or like words of encouragement for women that might be in the part of their, of those few years where like they're not performing as well? Because it can be really discouraging if like your performance, sometimes the effect is big. You're performing quite a bit slower or, not progressing at all.
My view on perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, um, just like a woman's reproductive years, which every woman's cycle they respond to differently. Even though we can look at the different phases of a woman's cycle and say, oh, well, you should feel better at this point in your cycle, and you might not feel as great at this point in your cycle. And most women will feel differently. And
Mhm.
the key there is that they, during that time, figure out when they feel best and make the most of that. The same goes for menopause and all of the stages that surround menopause. Every woman is going to experience it differently. And I use this term called anticipatory dread when it comes to perimenopause and menopause. And that is, so many women approach it assuming they're going to feel and experience all these horrible side effects of the drop in estrogen and the changes that come with that. And the reality is that everyone experiences it differently. And some women never notice menopause. It's just, oh, all of a sudden, that's it. They're done. Others have symptoms. And it's, for some, hormone replacement therapy may be advisable. That's something, that's a discussion to have with their doctor. And importantly, again, my age, when I was beginning going through that phase, no one talked about hormone replacement therapy. That was, you're going to get breast cancer, you don't do that. And today that discussion has opened up and there's a lot more options to talk about it. But I think it's important to try to pin down what you're dealing with, not to come into that phase in your life basically feeling like, oh, I'm going to end up with all of these side effects of that, because you may or you may not. And until you're there, you don't know. The other factor is kind of pinning down, is that why your performance is dropping? Or is it a training mistake? And oftentimes when I've had someone, a woman come to me at that point in their lives, and they say, I have this goal and I've been doing this and this and this. I've been doing everything right. And I look at their training and they're overrunning everything, for instance. So for instance, their training paces are just not consistent with their goals. But they believe they're doing everything right. And it's so frustrating because they get to race day and they fall apart. And that's not menopause. That's a training mistake. So kind of separating these, again, variables that are hard to pin down is important. And it may be menopause or it may not be menopause. And so first you have to talk with your doctor. And I'm not an expert on hormone therapy or any of that sort of stuff, but it's certainly something that a woman should talk to their doctor about. And if they have a coach, to really sit down and explain how they're feeling so that the coach, who is hopefully knowledgeable, can help work them through the specifics and, exactly what they're dealing with. It's so individual. I have coached hundreds of women through before, during, and after menopause. And during menopause is like one day. So I guess it's really perimenopause. And then the language is a little bit confusing. So once you no longer have had your period for a year, that's menopause. And before that is perimenopause. So it's that moment of, it's a year, then I guess that's considered. So, trying to learn about your body and how you're responding to things. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Are you hydrating? All of these things are important. Are you doing strength training? Because that can help maximize the use of the estrogen you have. Sleeping is important for human growth, because that's when human growth hormone is allowing you to recover from your workouts. All of that. And of course, one of the main symptoms that a lot of women deal with during perimenopause and menopause are sleep issues. So really addressing that is probably the most important factor. And unfortunately, there are lots of studies that show that taking sleep aids, like drugs for sleep, results in poor quality sleep. So, you may think you're sleeping, you got this prescription from a doctor so that you're sleeping more, and you may think you're sleeping, but the quality of the sleep isn't good. And so you're not actually recovering.
It's like alcohol.
Right.
Alcohol too. A lot of people will take alcohol because they say, "Oh, it helps me fall asleep," but I think it does something in the later cycles of your sleep that are
right. It helps you fall
disruptive.
asleep, but then you wake up and you can't get back to sleep. So, right. So there's figuring out what works, and it's difficult. It's difficult. A lot of people deal with sleep issues because their brains won't turn off. So, is that the issue, or are you just wide awake? Are you drinking caffeine too close to bed? Should you be eliminating that? Again, you got to look at everything. But necessarily, I kind of see a trend with women blaming all the ailments on menopause. And I think that might be missing the point, and that there might be other things going on. But obviously that is very individual.
Yeah, I think that's a good message, though. It's just, I guess, to identify what the actual problem is, or if you're having actual symptoms that you can write down and then address those.
Right. I know when I was going through perimenopause, I was having a lot of issues. My mom was having a lot of issues, and I was concerned about her, and I'd lie awake, worrying about her. She was 2,000 miles away from me. My sleep issues weren't menopause. My sleep issues were worrying about things I couldn't control. So that was something I had to learn how to deal with, because I could have said, "Oh, well, I'm worrying because of perimenopause," and I see that happening a lot. And so I see a lot of women kind of throwing everything, like, okay, I'm going to do everything right. And they're still so frustrated because they're gaining weight and they're slowing down and they have brain fog, and they don't have the energy that they want. But whether that's all menopausal or perimenopausal, I'm not convinced.
Okay.
So.
You did mention strength training, and how important it is for women, but it's important in general for athletes over 50. So, what would you say to anyone that, that is over 50 or maybe approaching 50 and still isn't doing any strength training?
So strength training is important for everyone. And it's not because it makes you a better runner. And I have changed my view on this. In the past, I'd have my runners doing strength training. But if time was limited and they could only run, it's like, fine, running comes first, because the principle of specificity in sport is pretty universally accepted. If you want to be a good runner, you have to run.
You have to run.
And you can't sacrifice your run time for other things, whether it's cross training, which may benefit you in other ways, or lifting. Lifting, contrary to what seems to make sense to us, but lifting does not substantially reduce running injuries. It's counterintuitive, but that's at least what the science shows. Lifting does not make you faster. I mean, it makes you maybe incrementally. So the question is, are the benefits either reduced injury or speed? No, those are not the benefits. However, maintaining muscle and maintaining bone mass are absolutely crucial to lifelong running. And so it's really something you need to start early, because especially for women, again, we pretty much have put down our max bone mass in our early 30s. And from there, you start losing it. And that loss is accelerated post-menopause, in like the 5 to 6 years post-menopause, that really accelerates because of the loss of estrogen. The only way to maximize the estrogen you have is to use it. And so what's crucial for people, and men also lose bone density. Men are not screened for osteoporosis the way that women are. They probably should be, but they aren't. And there are stories of men, and osteoporosis is very prevalent in the cycling community, because cycling is not an impact sport. But in running, while running is an impact sport, it is not enough. And many runners are very light, and so they don't necessarily, there's not that much impact on your bones. Bone density is improved by muscle pulling on the ends of bones very hard. So it's the contraction of muscles on the ends of bones. Does impact help? Yes, but really, really strong muscle contractions are the best way to maintain and build bone mass. So men need it just as much as women. There's also, as we hit our 50s, we start losing muscle mass. So as you get older, you start feeling a little loss of muscle power. So, you used to feel like your quads would fire more, and suddenly you're like, my quads aren't firing. Why is that? Well, because they're not as strong and you don't have as much muscle mass. The only way to address those issues is through heavy lifting. And so what is heavy lifting? Well, first of all, a lot of people are intimidated by lifting, especially women, but even men who haven't done it. They're worried about hurting themselves. So a lot of runners, because they don't want to bulk up, will emphasize the high rep. So I'm going to do, 50 bicep curls. That's what we do in running is high rep. We're just doing high reps. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. So we're using the same muscle fibers over and over and over again. And heavy lifting, so you're talking about max of 10 lifts. I like 6 to 8 lifts to failure, are getting muscle fibers that are not used in running. And they're also increasing that muscle contraction and that stress on the ends of bones. And so you're basically pulling your bone together. So the muscles are squeezing your bones together. Well, I mean, a lot of people see bones as static, and they're constantly turning over, just like your muscles, just like your tendons, just like your ligaments. They're not just there. You've got osteoblasts and osteoclasts. The osteoclasts are cleaning up all the old bone that you're done with, and the osteoblasts are bringing in new bone. And understanding that bone is dynamic like that is really important. So lifting is certainly once you're in your 50s, is no longer optional. And I joke about this to my runners all the time because I use Training Peaks for my coaching. And so in Training Peaks, you get a little green box if you've done the work and a little red box if you don't. And I keep on saying to my runners, I keep on seeing these red boxes on your strength training. This is not optional. I'm not just putting this in your schedule because I like to. Yeah, this is part of the training. So you have to do it. And learning how to do it properly is important. It's crucial. So I really encourage people who have no background in lifting to go and have some sessions with a personal trainer to learn proper form. You're not going to go into heavy lifting from the start. You're going to start and gradually add, just like you did with your running. So you're going to start with higher reps, but the goal is to get to a point where you can lift heavy. And of course, again, if you have a diagnosis of osteoporosis, that's something that you need to talk to your doctor about, talk to a physical therapist, because depending on what situation you're dealing with, there are certain things that you shouldn't do. So there may be ways to adapt exercises that will help you. But right now, there's a lot of research on osteoporosis. And while some doctors will say that you cannot improve your bone density, that has been shown not to be true, at least empirically. And people have improved their bone density.
I had a friend that had low bone density, but this was in university, so she would have been in her 20s. I don't know why her bone density was low, but she ended up eating a lot more calcium-rich foods, and she was a runner, but I don't know if she changed anything with her running, but she did end up building back her bone density, so it got better.
And she was at that point where she still could do that. And diet is still important, even if you're in your 50s, making sure you're getting enough calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K2, magnesium. These are all crucial, but it's harder to improve your bone density after your early 30s. So she caught that early. So those, whether you're male or female, if you're in your 30s and you are dealing with a lot of stress fractures, things like that, that's a red flag.
Okay.
That is a red flag. Unless your training is excessive. And I've seen this with, moderate training and repeated stress fractures. And that is definitely a red flag and something that you should address, whatever age you're at. I see it in, high school kids. And oftentimes it's because they're not eating enough. So they are in an energy deficit. And so that is certainly prevalent in running, where being light matters. So whatever age you're at, that's something to pay attention to. But it's not a lost cause if you're 60 years old, you're 6 years post-menopause, and you get a diagnosis for osteoporosis. You can still improve. That's what studies are indicating. It's not easy. And you're not going to improve the way that you would earlier in your life. But you can certainly stop the loss or slow it down through heavy lifting. But that's
encouraging.
Right. So, I mean, you have to remember that bone, like anything else, any other structure in the body, and this applies to whether you are wearing support shoes, if whatever structure in your body is not necessary, the body gets rid of it. Why maintain something you don't need? So if you're not using it, the use it or lose it is true, because the body is very efficient and it doesn't waste energy on things that it doesn't need. And if you don't make those demands, then the body doesn't maintain it. And so if you don't make the demands on your bones, the body doesn't maintain it. On the other side, a lot of runners are small. And so some of the diagnostic tools that we use to measure bone density can be misleading. So that is something that is being discussed today. There are new technologies that are being developed to possibly measure bone density more accurately, specifically in people who have small bones. Because small people are going to have small bones. Why? Because you don't make those demands. And you have to remember that the numbers that are being used to measure your bone density you're being compared to a 30-year-old. So of course, a 60-year-old is not going to be a 30-year-old. Does that mean that they have to be concerned that they're going to break something? I don't know, but it's not necessarily the case if you have osteopenia or have been told you have osteoporosis that you are fragile and you're going to break. So that's it. But a lot of people, that diagnosis is scary. And a lot of the downside is a lot of people who receive that diagnosis feel that they can't do anything, like they can't move. And that just further precipitates the problem. So
yeah, they get scared of doing anything.
Right. They're afraid that they're going to break. Now, if you're at a point in your osteoporosis where getting up from the couch, you break a rib, that's clearly
a different ballgame. Yeah.
That's a different ballgame. But
different.
So a lot of people will immediately go on the medicines that address osteoporosis, even though they've never had what's called a fragility or non-traumatic fracture. So, oh, well, I broke my arm. Well, did you break your arm picking up a glass of water? If you did, then you might want to talk to your doctor about some medication. But if you fell off your bike and broke your arm, that's an acute injury. That's not a fragility fracture. So knowing how to take care of yourself, because unfortunately doctors will, and sometimes in cases of just osteopenia, they will recommend bone drugs. And there are a lot of side effects with those. So I would just warn to, do your research on that. But the best thing you can do is start lifting.
Start lifting.
And start at the level that's appropriate for you.
Start, absolutely. And again, if you don't have any experience with lifting, I would highly recommend hiring a personal trainer, even for a few sessions. There is a great study called the Lift More study. It's LIFTMOR. I don't think there's an E on it. Where they did research on lifting and osteoporosis. And there's basically like 5 key exercises to do that they found increased bone density or slowed the progression of osteoporosis. And it's a very thorough study. So you don't have to learn it. People go, well, where do I even start? There's certain movements that you should touch on, but learn that from a certified professional in this.
Okay, cool. And for the rest of the people, I guess, who don't have an issue at this point in time in terms of osteoporosis, or apparently not, we're all getting older, so we all still need to invest in a proactive manner to extend our useful lives, so to speak.
Right. Regardless of whether you have osteoporosis, at a certain age, you start losing muscle and you start losing bone, period. So the only way to address that is to start lifting.
Okay.
Even if you don't have a diagnosable issue.
Yeah. So that was my point.
Right.
In the just moving on a little bit, in the section on training, you have 3 sort of big blocks of things that you discuss. aerobic development in your training. So developing your aerobic base, I guess. Training specificity, and you've touched on specificity just during our conversations, and running efficiency or running economy. Tell our listeners a little bit more about those things.
Obviously, if you're running anything over a 400 meter, really
Which most of us are.
Right. Sprint coaches really cut off sprinting at 200 meters, but we can extend that out to 400 meters. Then you're doing endurance. And so if you're doing an endurance run, the number one system that you need to develop is your aerobic system. And so volume of running matters in order to develop that aerobic system. And it is the first thing that you need to do before you build the rest of your system. So before you start doing speed work, before you start hitting the hills, you need a basis of aerobic fitness. And a lot of people will kind of skip that and say, well, you know, I'm going to do, one of the typical things they see is I run 3 days a week. So I do a speed session, a hill session, and a long run. And they run about 15 miles a week with a, 8 to 10 mile long run, and the rest they're running like 3 to 4 miles on the other runs. That's not going to adequately build your aerobic system. You have to be running at an easy aerobic pace to really be building your aerobic system, a pace where you can talk and where you can continue to run. Otherwise, you're developing different metabolic pathways. You're developing different response to the training. With speed training, hill repeats, those are great. It's just that you're not ready for them, and you're not running enough easy aerobic runs. And easy, yes, recovery, there's a range. So there's going to be your kind of medium long runs where you're going out and you're running comfortably, but it's not an easy jog, but you're not uncomfortable. You're not huffing and puffing. You can still talk. And then there's the recovery runs that they're super easy. And then if you do those right, then when it comes time to do the fast stuff, you can do the fast stuff faster than you would have if you were always running those other ones too fast. So I equate that to the foundation of a house. So you don't build the house before you build the foundation, because the house is going to crumble. So you have to see the aerobic development as your foundation. And the deeper the aerobic development is, the more solid your foundation is going to be. And with that, the higher the house can be built. So if you've got a very shallow foundation, you're not going to be able to build that house very tall, because the foundation won't support it. So that's what I mean by aerobic development. And so if I start someone running, they're going to be running. I'm not going to say I'm not going to throw in any speed. I would do some fartleks, some strides, but those are more for form than actual speed development. I mean, there's the idea of leg turnover and kind of form practice that is important, but it's not to develop a robust type of speed development. And then in terms of specificity, and this depends on what your goals are. So there's two aspects to specificity, and one is what I already said, which is if you want to run well, you have to run. You can bike if you want, but biking isn't going to make you a strong runner. Ultimately, it comes down to running, and all the studies show that the best runners run more. And there's a strong correlation between, for instance, marathon times and weekly mileage. Now, of course, most of us have kind of a top level of volume that we can tolerate physically before we start breaking down. And one of the reasons why elite runners are elite is because they have the ability to tolerate 100 plus mile weeks. which a lot of people can't. And that may be genetic. There's not much
Could
you
it
can do
also
about
be because they don't run their easy runs easy enough?
Sure. I mean, yes, and they're not recovering. They're have other stresses in life. The other thing to keep in mind, and maybe Alan, this is part of your success over 60 of running a sub 3-hour marathon, is that you were retired. So
Yep.
you had the time for the self-care, you had the time for the recovery.
Absolutely.
So I've had runners where, they aren't working and they can run in the morning and they can take a nap and then they can go and lift. And most people can't do that. So if you have that ability and you go and you get some supplementary, well, maybe they're not supplementary, but massages and physical therapy and all of the extra stuff that so many recreational or, ambitious but not professional runners kind of neglect. Like a lot of us go to physical therapy or go get a massage because something's hurting, not before something's hurting. So we neglect that. So the specificity has to do with running, but specificity in terms of training also has to do with your goals. So what race, if you're training for a race, and one of the things in the book is, running is running and you don't have to run a race. I ran for years and years and didn't ever, or very rarely ran a race. But you could still have goals within that. So if you have goals, is your training consistent with those goals? So if you have, let's say you've picked a marathon, I'll just throw out Big Sur. Big Sur is a hilly marathon. If you're going to run Big Sur, you better be doing some hill training. If you have time goals, if you're running Chicago, you better be doing some heat training. So that kind of specificity is important, and making sure that your training is consistent with the course you're training for. This becomes very important in something like ultra running, where you're dealing with different technical demands. And, obviously with ultra running, you're dealing with some races that have massive amounts of loss and gain and elevation, and other times you're not. And a lot of people think flat 100-milers are easy, and they have some of the highest DNF rates because people don't know how to run them. So you have to make sure that you're training for the demands of the race that you have your eye on. So specificity is kind of twofold there, just in general terms and in specific training terms. And then in terms of efficiency, we become more efficient runners by running. That we just do. And there's a lot of emphasis on gait discussions today, and whether you have a good running gait or a bad running gait. Some of the best runners in the world have running gaits that are painful to watch. One of the things we need to be very careful about is messing with our running gait, because oftentimes running gait is the result of all kinds of stuff you don't know about that's going on in your body. You could have a shoulder you got something wonky going on with your shoulder, or you were born that way and it's affecting your running gait. But if you look at someone like Joan Samuelson or Paula Radcliffe, they don't have the best running gaits, but they're really good runners. And so being efficient in your own body takes time. And the best way to become an efficient runner is to run more. So that's kind of what I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. Is doing a little bit of fast running, just like you said earlier about strides, does that actually help you as well in terms of your economy?
Yes. And I think especially with older runners, we tend to be a little bit more nervous about fast running. And one of my favorite workouts are 100 sprint floats. So you go on a track, or you can go on a road. I will sometimes give this to someone on a road in the middle of a long run. So a road with, say, telephone poles.
Hmm.
Do you guys have telephone poles?
Yep.
Yeah, or light
So
poles.
telephone poles. So you run
Yep.
fast for two telephone poles, you jog for two telephone poles, and you do that to the, and it's really
Till the
fun.
end
Or
of
you
the
get on a
road.
track
Mhm.
and you really sprint the straights, and then what I call a float. You float the turns. So you let that momentum carry you. You're not totally jogging, but you're doing a recovery. You hit the straight, you sprint it, you float the turn. And they're workouts that runners love. They also work pretty well on treadmills. So, and it's not a super stressful run. By the end of it, you're going to feel it, but it's not like 400, 400 repeats. And
Mhm.
you're actually moving your legs fast. So, speed is as neurological as it is physical. I mean, neurological is physical, but you got to wire your brain. You've got to set up new neural pathways to keep your feet able to spin fast. And so really mixing up the paces is important. And so I assign a lot of fartleks. So Americans have a hard time with fartleks because they're kind of like, well, explain to me when I'm supposed to be doing these fast bits, and whenever you feel like it. That makes me very,
Yes,
very uneasy.
could you
So,
program it into my watch, please?
right, exactly. Right. So what I've started doing is like, okay, as soon as your watch beeps, and for us it's a mile, do 25 seconds at a faster speed. Maybe it's a sprint, maybe it's just a little faster, whatever you feel like doing. Do that every mile, or do that every kilometer, or every other kilometer, something like that, to help them get over that. But yes, absolutely keeping some speed in the mix. And it doesn't matter what distance you're running. This is a big issue for ultra runners. They just do everything slow and they lose their ability to learn to run fast. So one of the things that I emphasize, and a lot of people talk about the 80-20, 80% easy, 20% really hard, is that yes, I subscribe by that. Maybe even a little, I don't know, for someone over 50, I might say it doesn't even need to be 20%, but the fast stuff has to be really hard. Like, so if you're running all your runs at an 80% effort, you're going to be too tired to do the really fast stuff fast. And so that should be the emphasis, is running easy so that you can run fast. Otherwise, you're running everything in the middle, and running everything in the middle is just going to lead to often injuries and plateaus. So you get to those frustrating points where you're not making any progress.
And there's something that you say in the book about you do talk about consistency. It's really important to be consistent. So, just stacking the training on top of each other. But you say you have to be consistent yet flexible. How do runners do that? Because most runners will be like, yes, okay, I'm consistent. I do all the runs on the training plan. Where does this flexibility come in?
The flexibility comes in, and let's say that you have a tempo run on the calendar, but you're not feeling it. You didn't sleep well, you had a stressful day, you're just not feeling it. You go out and you kind of feel like your legs are attached to lead weights. And in that case, let it go and don't force it. And this is something, that elite runners are able to do. It's because if you can't do the workout that you're set to do, you can kind of do it, but not really. Then what's the point of that workout? You're not hitting the workout the way that you need to for the adaptation that you're looking for. So it's not easy to do that. And of course, if you're training and say using one of the training plans in the book and you're sick, what do you do? I've got a ton of runners right now who have the flu. The flu is like wiping out everyone, and it's taken people out for like 2 weeks. Now you come back to a training plan, you're like, well, do I start up where I left off? Do I start up where I should have been had I not been sick? And that's where you gotta have to say, okay, just take it one day at a time and see how you're feeling. And I know that makes people nervous, but the other alternative is to try to force something that isn't working. So not investing too much into, again, any one run. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about I have one bad run and suddenly the whole training cycle is up. But that's not the case. And if you need to skip a run or you need to reschedule something because you're just not feeling it, then that's what you have to do. So that's the kind of flexibility that it kind of takes some maturity and letting go of a lot of runners are quite driven in type A personalities, so we're the
checklist type. Like we like to check things. We like to check all those boxes. We're definitely
right. Unfortunately, especially as we get older, we need to listen to our bodies more. And pressing on, even though it's killing you, is not going to lead to a good response from your body.
Fundamentally, this comes back to what you said earlier about being smarter. As you develop the knowledge and the experience, you got to apply that, use it for something. So
right, absolutely. And not, you can't invest. And I remember when I was younger and I had 102 fever and I'd still go out and do my run. And, that was just stupid. What did I get out of that? Well, I did get, and I'm really conservative. If someone has something that's feeling tweaky, if they feel at all like they're coming down with something, it's like, take a couple days off. The rule is with running, especially when sick, is body aches, fever, cough, sore joints, no run. If you're just sneezy, but your energy level is good, fine. But just don't push it, because you just end up extending it, and then you end up losing more training time.
Mm-hmm. And what about this idea of a detraining cycle? That word probably sounded really scary to everybody, but I know what you mean, because with my old team, we used to do this because we would have seasons. We had like outdoor track and then cross country, and we sort of didn't really do indoor track. Like we kind of hopped into some races just as like to measure where we're at kind of thing. So I feel like we had one of these like off-season type detraining cycles incorporated just because of the way that the types of races we were doing and how that worked. But yeah, why should runners detrain after they've trained so hard to gain all these?
Think, right, and it is a difficult one. Now, first of all, the detraining cycle will not actually detrain you, because it's going to be basically, the way that I map this out is a week, and this is, post a big race. You take a week off, you can still do things like swim, hike, bike, but you're not running. You don't have any scheduled runs. Just let that go. The next week, you can start adding in a few short runs, and that's going to increase over the 4 to 5 weeks that's scheduled for a detraining cycle. The point is mental. And I do think this is something that older runners may need more than younger runners, is that kind of mental break from the constant, I've got to run. Okay. Now, first of all, most of us do not have to run. We get to run, and that's great. But there are times in training cycles where it doesn't feel like that. And so I find they're very regenerative and allow you to recharge the battery so that you're ready to jump back into it. You're kind of champing at the bit to get back to training by the end of it. And It gives you an opportunity to do some other things, and it's good for your body. Now, admittedly, I train a lot of people for long races, but this also is very helpful when I'm training someone for 5Ks or 10Ks. Oftentimes they're doing multiple 5Ks and 10Ks. So they're kind of doing, like you're explaining, almost a season type thing where you're building over time on these races, but you're doing a lot of them as opposed to a marathon or an ultra marathon where you might be doing some shorter races leading up to that goal race, but those are usually training races. They're not seen as goals. So having at least once a year, and it's not after every training cycle, but at least once a year, timing that, planning it. It's not something that happens because you're injured. It's not something that happens because you're sick, but you're planning it and you're looking forward to it. So it's like, oh, after this, I can take a break. And then after that break, and you're not going to lose fitness. I know or if you lose fitness, it's minimal, but you're going to gain recovery, which actually the bounce back is better than if you had just kind of kept training through that. Now, again, the detraining training cycles, it's not that you're inactive. You can do all kinds of activities. You're just not running, at least for that first 1 to 2 weeks, you may not run. And then that starts getting added back in. But it's also a way for you to bring other things into it. I try to get all my runners swimming, because swimming is great cross training for running. Studies show that it helps improve recovery rates in runners. So go swim, go take a bike ride, or just chill and bake some cookies, spend more time with your family, go out with your friends, do something that you don't have time to do when you're training. And then you're ready to jump back into it after that. So it's not something I used to really incorporate, but I've found myself personally, I look forward to that. I usually try to schedule it around the end of the year during the holiday season, because I find so many people are stressed out trying to balance the holidays and training. And of course, that depends on what races you're picking. But
if you're doing the Houston half, then that won't work, because I think that's in January.
Right, exactly. Or I've had runners who have run CIM. So, that's like right in the middle of it. And they're always hating it. It's like, why did I schedule a race during the holidays? It's like, well, obviously there are different priorities. And this, you're not going to necessarily schedule that race every year. And you can schedule your off time at a different time. But taking some downtime during the year is important, not just going. You get through one goal, you don't even have a chance to think about it, even with a normal recovery of 3-4 weeks, where you take a few days off and then you gradually rebuild. It's not the same thing as this dedicated cycle of recovery.
Yeah, if you want to have a good rest over Christmas, probably target Philadelphia Marathon at the end of November. And then when you've done that, you've got the whole justification for just having the whole of the holiday period as your detraining cycle. Perfect.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, New York can work.
Yeah.
That's true. New York is late as well.
If you can get in
November.
Right. I think it does often work the end of the year, because a lot of fall marathons would allow for at least some overlap there. So, but this is totally, that has to do with personal choices. But I think it's important to have something like that in your schedule.
What about people who are not, they say they don't want to compete and they're not interested in competing? What are the advantages of having a competitive, a race in your schedule or something competitive?
That's a good question. As I pretty much stopped racing competitively when I was 26 and started racing again at 45. So, and as I said, I did jump into a few races during that time, but they like Boulder, because that's what you do in Boulder. But those were for fun and not racing. But I had other I had other, not competitive goals, but other goals with rock climbing. So my running goals were kind of put to the side, and I trained for, I ran one marathon during my rock climbing years, and I trained for it a little bit, but not thoroughly. But it was really hard to train for a marathon and climb hard. So I said, I'm not doing that again. So that's why I said, well, when I'm done really trying to push it rock climbing, I'll run all these races I want to run. So, you know, I have some runners who just want to be consistent runners, lifelong consistent runners. It's important for their mental health. It's obviously important for their physical health. As I tell some of my older runners who they see themselves kind of slowing down, and, you know, the problem with saying, oh, well, I guess maybe it's just my time to quit, is that if you do that in 10 years, ask yourself where you're going to be. You know, aging goes on, whether we continue being active or not. And you will be in a better place in 10 years if you stay active, you know, if it's running or whatever. But staying as active as you can be will keep you more active as you get older. So in terms of, I don't think competition is necessary. And for runners, I think it's fun. And one of the aspects of my book is that as we get older, running also provides a community of people who are active. And it's important because the people around you are going to influence you. So if you're around active people, you're going to be active. If you're around sedentary people, you're going to be sedentary. And so having that community that encourages you to continue being active is important. So that can be a running club, or it can just be a few friends that you meet up with and run with. But having that community as you get older, because as we get older, there's going to be more people around us who are not active, who, you know, they'd rather watch football than go out and run, you know, a daily run. And, you know, watching football is fine, but it's, you know, it's not going to make you healthy. Watch the football after you go for a run.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right. So enjoy the football game after you go for a run. But, you know, if you surround yourself with people who encourage you to stay active, that's important, whether it is in a competition setting or not. My experience with competitions, and especially since right now I'm more focused on very long runs, so ultra runs, is the kinds of people I meet over the course of a 100-mile run. You know, I have made close friends. My last 100-miler, it was pouring rain. I ended up breaking my foot, and I finished, and it was because of two people. It was because of two people who I started running with at 50 miles through soaking, pouring rain. And, you know, the impact that those relationships have on your life, you know, even though it's these moments, these experiences that are incredibly painful and hard, and there's someone there with you, who you don't even know. You didn't know them the day before, and they are there for you. And that kind of community is really affirming when it comes to humanity and just what we can do, what we're capable of doing. So I do think, I don't necessarily think that races are necessary. I do think that they are very rewarding. And I don't know of too many people who have gone into races and regretted trying to do that. But, you know, especially for people coming into the sport and it's new to them, it's also a little intimidating. So it's, you know, that's another factor. So for those people, maybe, you know, trying a run club might help. Just form that community, and then maybe they'll sign up for a race with their new running friends. But in terms of just getting older and maintaining a healthy community is also important. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if that answered your question.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, from a personal point of view, and Liz would probably concur with this, you might be in a situation where you can't hit your personal bests anymore, or you don't think you can do that. Never say never, but there's a lot of, personally, I think there's a lot of mileage in being able to do a training program, look at that training program and target a competition and say, okay, based on my training program, I think this should be my plan for my competition. And then trying to deliver your plan, execute your planned sort of race on race day. And that might be far away from your personal best. But I think in the running community, you often hear people say, well, it wasn't my best time, but it's the race I'm most proud of.
Right.
Because what you've done is you've taken your current level of fitness, you've applied some racecraft and knowledge into your racing day, and you've delivered something that you're extremely proud of. And I think Liz and I both have. We have one race in particular that we did together where we said on the day, we don't think we could have got many more seconds out of that marathon. We executed almost a perfect plan on the day. And, we're immensely proud of that, even though that's nowhere near our PRs.
Right. And I've had the same sort of races. I remember a Boston Marathon where I was being very careful about my pacing. I paced it exactly the way I wanted. And the last 6 miles, I felt stronger than I ever have in a marathon. And there's nothing like that feeling where you're like, and you're just passing everyone. And there's me and one other woman in front of me, and we're weaving between people. And you can tell she feels good. I feel good. Everyone around us is dying.
And that's so hard to do in Boston too.
Yeah, one of
is.
one of those people you're passing is me, because I've done 7 Bostons and I've never got it right yet.
I've had those Bostons. I've had good, well, when the weather's been good, I've had all the weather in Boston. But when the weather is reasonable, I've had good runs there. But it's, this particular, it almost felt like this woman ahead of me and I were running together. I felt like this connection with this person is like, we're both having a day. We're both having a moment right now. And we're taking it. And, turning on to, turning off of Boylston, or turning on to Boylston, and you see the finish and you're like feeling great, not dying.
Yeah.
So, and knowing that you did it well. My first Boston qualifying marathon, and I was in my late 40s. I remember I was still a novice marathoner. I think it was like my 3rd marathon, and I wasn't a coach. I knew about training, but not a whole lot. And I decided that I was going to go by my plan. And I remember the start, and everyone's just flying by me, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm saying inside my head, stay on your pace, stay on your pace, stay on your pace. And it worked. And this was like a light bulb race for me, because I felt great all the way through. And my other marathon experiences were, the last 5 miles is a death march. And because I went out too fast, because, hey, I felt good. How many runners I've
famous last words.
I have runners. I said, do not go out too fast. These are the paces. And they're going out 20 seconds, a minute too fast. And they inevitably say to me, but I felt so good. It's like, yeah, you should feel really good at the beginning of a marathon. It should feel like you're jogging at the beginning of the marathon. And so that worked for me. And it was definitely an aha moment when everyone, again, that was my first experience where everyone else was dying and I felt great. Yeah. Was it my fastest marathon? No, it wasn't. I ended up running much faster into my 50s, but that was that first experience for me. So, having that training and seeing how it actually translates into a successful race and putting a plan together. Now, as a coach, one of my jobs is to help my runners understand how to understand that plan. So when they have done their training, and we talk about their goals over the course of the training cycle, but ultimately about a week or two before, it's like, okay, what are your A, B, and C goals? A being best possible day, everything goes right, and I feel like I feel awesome. B is it's hard but doable, and C is things kind of went poorly, but I'm still satisfied. And usually they get it around where I want them to. After I've kind of like taught them how to look at their training and how I look at it, and I'll usually guess within a very small margin of error what they're going to run. But it sets them up to go out on a plan that's going to offer a successful result, not just in the time, but also in how they feel, because there's nothing better than feeling strong at the end of a race. Not so strong that you feel like you didn't run hard enough, but that you ran a good race. You know, you're still completely spent at the end, but you didn't die 3 miles from the end, because that last 3 miles can be really awful.
Yeah.
So, you know, learning how to look at the training and figure out how that translates into how you should strategize your race is powerful, to have that ability to do that. And that's one of the challenges. I think it's one of the things that runners have a hard time. It's just like paces in general. You know, training plans will say, run this tempo at a 10K pace or whatever. And people are like, well, what's my 10K pace? I don't know. So that's
and
one
you
of the
can
challenges.
go and use these calculators, but I mean, everybody's got a skill set, right? So they're off. They're not like precise, but runners take them for, you know, for the gospel, and they want to follow them exactly.
The paces that Garmin says I should be able to run right now is not.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So luckily,
I have the same struggle.
I'm not listening to Garmin. So
exactly. So, you know, I mean, yeah, we could probably continue for another like 3 hours, but we're conscious of your time. So, you do have like a section for like race day strategy and all kinds of things like that people can check out if they want to buy the book. And so, where would you like to direct listeners if they do want to get a copy?
Sure. Well, it is available on Amazon. It is also available through Human Kinetics on their website. I think those are the two primary places. And yeah, I think those are the two options. I don't know if there's any price differential between the two.
And if people want to follow you and see what you're up to, are you online somewhere?
You know, I'm not super active on social media. I have a website. It is thelongruncoaching.com. I am on Instagram, but oftentimes I'm posting pictures of my dogs more than I'm posting, or pretty pictures more than I'm posting, you know, coaching related.
I'm following you immediately to see pictures of your
So
dogs.
that's the Long Run. The Long Run Coaching is on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and I've got the Long Run Facebook page that I should probably do more with. And then I've got my own Facebook profile. Yeah, I should probably do more with social media, but honestly, you know, in terms of my coaching, I interact with a lot of people on social media. So I do a whole lot of interaction. I'm in a lot of running groups, and I offer advice, and you know, I see it as kind of, my aim with my runners has always been to give them the information and the ability to be autonomous. So to make good decisions on their own, because say, you know, during marathons, stuff happens and you need to be able to problem solve. A lot of my runners are ultra runners. You need to be able to problem solve. And so you need to understand the process. So I'm always asking, I don't just tell my runners to do X. I explain to them why they're doing X. And if they have any questions, I'll answer that. So I'm on social media a lot, but I don't feel super comfortable pushing my coaching on social media. If someone's interested in something I've had to say, they're welcome to come and talk with me. But I have never been kind of out there saying, hey, I'm looking for clients and all of that. I have plenty of clients, just kind of through word of mouth. And I try to be the best coach I can be, and that hopefully spreads in the community, and that's how I get business. But I tend not to be out there kind of peddling my business. So social media is something I use, but not in a traditional sense that a lot of coaches use it. But I spend a lot of time on Facebook answering people's questions. So, because there's all kind, people get some pretty bad advice on Facebook. I wrote a blog post about that once. Like, if you want some really bad advice, go ask some questions about training on Facebook. And not that I have all the answers, but there's some things that are clearly wrong. So
no, I was just gonna say, and oftentimes like the nuance is lost. It's like they answer a question in like one sentence, but the thing is like it depends. And
right.
Yeah,
right.
And you don't get that usually.
If it was easy, we'd have all the answers by now.
That would exactly. Right. And a lot of people just answer things as this is the way it is. And science is truth, but science is agreed upon truth based on research. And the experts agree that right now we agree that this is the way it works, but that changes. So it's not that it's somehow etched in stone and forever and always will be that way. So, I come from a philosophy background. So the whole idea of truth, like math is truth, and beyond math, there's no truth. So, there is truth. We may just not know it. So, a lot of people put things out there as this is the absolute way of doing things. And we are still figuring that out. Yeah, we're always learning. And so that's very important to keep in mind. And we're always individuals. So we will always respond to the training in different ways. It was very, very difficult. I'll just add this and then I'll stop. But it's very difficult for me to do the training plans for the book. But Human Kinetics really wanted it. And I respected that. And I understand the books like that need them, but I have a hard time with static training programs. So just philosophically, because I don't know who I'm designing them for. So that is also part of the flexibility that we talked about earlier, that being able to be flexible with these static training programs is important, because just because it's on the training program, because if you are a running client of mine and you said, I'm just not feeling it today, I would change your calendar. I can't do that with those static training plans. So, and sometimes life happens. So that's just kind of a caveat of any kind of static training plan, to keep in mind that just because it's on your training schedule doesn't mean that you should do it, because sometimes you shouldn't.
Wise words.
Yeah.
And in terms of learning and education, I think, the book, there's a lot to be obtained out of that book. So if people are looking to learn more and be able to chart their own way forward, reading this book, you could do a lot worse than read the book.
Well, a lot of the kind of basic physiology and training theory stuff that just applies to all of us. That's not necessarily 50 plus specific. That's just training physiology. So that's kind of like the basics, but I felt like I needed to put that in there because that's important to understand as a self-trained runner. And as Gene Dykes wrote in the foreword, when he read the book, he was sort of like, oh, well, this is how you become a self-coached runner, which is great. I'm putting myself out of business, but it is, that was the aim of the book, as it is the aim that it's my aim with my runners as well, as I said, to give them the tools to do what I'm doing. And sometimes they still need me because they want that accountability, or they're changing their direction or something like that. But yeah, to give them that understanding.
Sometimes it's just also just the offloading of the responsibility of picking your own training plan.
Right.
Like there's something about that because, I mean, Alan and I have done training plans from books for the like last few marathon attempts, but most of it is just because like you don't have to ask yourself every day what you're gonna do. You just like you have something on the fridge and yeah, we adjust it if needed, but
It reduces your decision exhaustion.
yeah.
No, and I think having some sort of plan in place is important. Just not making it like the gospel. Like I must do it this way. Or there were times before I was coaching that I would kind of start a plan, and somewhere through the training cycle, I was exhausted and I said, this isn't working for me. It's just too much. And so I changed. But the danger in this is what I call noodling. I wrote a blog post on this, basically picking and choosing different key workouts. So you've got like, oh, I saw this really cool workout in Runner's World. I'm going to add that in. You have no idea what its purpose is or how to work it in, but it sounds really cool. So you're going to do that. So you make your own training plan with all these cool workouts, and you have no idea the continuity. It's a holistic plan. It has to be holistic. And there are phases that you go through in training, and you can't just kind of throw a bunch of junk against the wall and expect for a good result. So having some sort of training plan, I think, is important. I'm just saying that you have to listen to your body as well.
Yeah, except that also, like, I find listening to your body is quite difficult because sometimes you don't know what it's telling you, because having some fatigue during a marathon training cycle is like really normal and kind of necessary. So,
I guess the difference comes, and you're not sleeping well, you're feeling cranky, kind of depressed, those kinds of signs just all over fatigue, not just I'm a little sore, but just all over fatigue. That's a hard one. And yes, runners have a hard time, am I being lazy or do I really need to take a break? And I totally understand that. But, if things are hurting and then you keep pushing, I'm kind of at that point because I'm coming back from having my broken foot during the 100, and suddenly I can run and I overdid it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
You're so excited.
None of us are.
Like I can run. So yeah, I'm at that point right now. So I totally get it. And it's not easy, but also there's no magic in that training plan that some adjustments aren't, maybe they aren't necessary, but if they are, then heed that. Is especially as you're older, I would say, instead of just pushing through, because I see a lot of people pushing through, injuries and things like that.
Should we give our potted summaries?
Sure. Do you want to stay for that?
Sure.
So, Running Past 50 by Caolan MacMahon. Well, first of all, I think there's good information in this book, not only for over 50 runners, but probably at least anyone over the age of 35. I think that's the sort of definition of the veteran, and you can start practicing things that are going to maximize your results and set you up for years to come. And as Caolan has pointed out, a lot of the information in the book is just basic good run sense and run craft, and good for anybody from that point of view. Personally, I'm a believer that your running is a lifetime journey, and this book offers you many aspects for consideration to make that journey better, more enjoyable, with better outcomes along the way. What I would suggest is that you could read this book, you could choose a small adjustment to your running journey based upon what speaks to you. The idea being that would be an adjustment that you're able to sustain and make into a habit. And that could be anything from running, training, recovery, competing, strength training, lifting. But I think, my suggestion would be keep it small, and then it's easy to deliver on top of whatever you're doing now, or instead of whatever you're doing now. and then it becomes a habit, and then you're moving forward, and then you look for your next thing out of the book. That would be my advice for sort of using the book. And as the book says towards the end, believe in yourself.
I guess I'll just add a little bit about the book itself. So, although it's not a female-specific book, I really love that 3 women on the cover can represent a book for everybody. Like, welcome to 2025. I love that. So, great cover. A lot of good points addressed. I like the section about the importance of detraining and how it can actually help run faster in the next season. Those were actually words from the book. And if I had heard those words like several years ago when I had a coach that would, routinely make us take like 2 weeks off running at a certain time of the year, I think I would have, embraced it more. It was kind of more of a dread. But, if you know that this is going to make you faster next season, then, that makes all the difference. I love the section about reasons why runners don't want to compete. So that's another thing that I find was addressed really well in the book. Competition can be a big scary word for some people, and especially those that enter sport later. And I find that the book does a really good job of sort of highlighting the benefits and kind of breaking down some barriers to the idea of competition. The inclusion of the training plans was really great. I mean, I guess, it wasn't Caolan's first choice to include them, but it makes the book a really good all-around book because now you can get all of the technical knowledge and you have all of the training plans from like 5K to ultramarathon in there. And it's just like, it makes it a good, starting point book. And it also addresses some advanced topics. So I think that the book is probably, I mean, it's not really for the runner that's just getting off their couch and running their first 5K. I think like you probably want to first start running, do like a couch to 5K plan and then buy the book. I think the book has like a few things that are a little bit more advanced, but once you've been running for at least 3 months and you're sold on the idea, I think it's a great book to get. That's it.
Good stuff. Thanks for spending time with us. And
Well,
quite a lot of time. We've had quite a lengthy podcast.
I know.
Thank you for inviting. I know I can be a little verbose.
That's good.
So.
We like that.
It's great. People like that because, like, lots of information. We're all kind of nerdy runners, so let's talk about running.
I know. Well, when I start talking about running or when I start talking about philosophy, I can go on. So, but I really appreciate, sitting down and talking with you and meeting you. And this is really fun to do.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to the publisher Human Kinetics for providing review copies of the book to Liz and I. Aren't Human Kinetics a fantastic publisher, Liz?
Mm-hmm.
We get many good books from those guys.
Yeah, seems like they're always kind of looking for the next topic that's going to help runners. They have a lot of good books.
A big thank you to Caolan for spending time with us today. Quite a juggle of times today because I'm in Australia, you're in Eastern North America, and Caolan's on Mountain Time, so we had an interesting connection. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us comments on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter or X we are reviews_running. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform if you haven't already done so. If you have been listening to us for a while and you're wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. As usual, if you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Even if you're not enjoying the podcast, spread the word, because spreading the word, all publicity is good publicity. Liz is still waiting for her 1-star review on Spotify. Share a link with your favorite episode with a running partner. Basically, get us out there, please. leave us a review on Apple Podcast if you listen to the podcast on Apple, or leave us a rating on Spotify. It doesn't have to be 1 star, but we'll take any review you leave us. We're also on a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. If you go to buymeacoffee.com and look for Creator Running Book Reviews, you can find all sorts of freebies, outtakes, pictures, comments, stories, etc. And you don't have to buy us coffees, but there is a button to buy us a coffee if you'd like to reward us a little bit. Every contribution helps. That's all from Running Book Reviews for now. Bye!
Bye.